Hey guys, I just wanted to make a quick video and let everyone know that I'm putting online right now a training that I did with our entire staff, not our entire staff, but a good chunk of our staff on post-production. Basically, it is from start to finish on how we did the entire post for this Disney Plus commercial that we did about a year ago. It covers everything from CG to VFX to editing to color grading. It's basically the ins and outs on how we did everything on a very, very tight timeline. So anyone that's interested in getting into post-production, this is something really, really valuable. It's years and years and years of experience and education I'm sharing. And you can see like firsthand how I teach our staff here at Mbrella Films on how to handle this sort of thing. So here it is.
And so what I'm trying to do is provide tools to people now, tools like math tools to people so that they can be ahead and understand. And guys, I think that one of the most important things is like as you do this, it'll become muscle memory, but you have to be 2 steps ahead of the agency and the client all the time. Whatever we do. And Jake, you and I have been experiencing this on the client comes back or we need to tell the client something. Like this last week, we said that there's 10-hour days, right? And so the production team wants to go out and do this extra recce now, right? But the client told us about these 10-hour days last week, and so now it's late to bring it up to them. The thing is that when they told us that they had 10-hour days, with the talent, right? They booked the talent for 10-hour days. We should have automatically said at that time, okay, I understand. Let me get with the production team and make sure that we're able to accommodate that. And then we talk with the production team and say, guys, are you sure? Totally, you don't need to do anything else. Do you need extra recce time? Do you need more shoot time? We don't want to commit to that 10 hours yet until, right? But we went ahead and said, okay, sure. And then a week later, they said that they need this extra recce day. Now they're going to come back and say, why didn't you tell us last week? You guys need to foot the bill, right? So we need to always be, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to the point where we're recognizing all this stuff happening before. And a lot of it's just doing a lot of jobs so that you realize what they're doing. But yeah, let's talk about this. So some of the,
my background,
going from post to,
well, my background's different from, like, I'm fortunate enough to work outside of Mbrella Films before I came here, right? So
this is not your out of high school.
Yeah, no, not my first job, but that was good because when you work other places, right, you have to learn how to adapt to different working styles, and you have to learn how to, like, you know, you see how different people manage a production, like how their outlook is on it. And I'm saying that first, just so everybody here understands that, like, I understand everybody here's been training to do their job a certain way, and everybody here has seen production in one light, right? In like the Mbrella Films or Filma style. And then, whereas when I get into a production, I never look at it as, I never think it's easy. I never think that it's going to be smooth sailing or it's the same. I never look at 2 jobs and think it's just like that one I did before, because whenever you do that, that's when you're screwed, because you're being cocky and you're forgetting that every production has its own nuance. To get to your point is,
guys, make sure you're taking notes. You're not working on anything else right now, please.
So that's why whenever I get a production come in, right, I spend the time to ask the questions. I know, I don't assume I know the answers, but ask questions, and then I'll be very thorough about. By the end of that initial conversation you have with your clients, you should have a map in your head that's from beginning to end, from like the quoting process to what shoot day is going to look like, how post is going to look like, right? And then when I sit down and do the budget, I also think about that when I'm doing the budget. I don't do this thing where, like Josh and Andrew does it a lot, where they just copy a thing and then they'll change the header.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I'll still copy an old budget, right? But then I'll go through every single line item, and then I'll sit down and use it as a checklist of like.
So we
Doing-
go through every line item.
I know, but like.
We don't start with a brand new one.
Yes, but you don't start with brand new when you go through every line item. But I go from a big budget and tear down, rather than going from something actually super similar, right? So that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just an efficiency point.
Yeah,
I don't do that because I don't want to leave something in there that shouldn't be in there.
Yeah. Whereas I do the opposite because I want to have a big budget first, and then I'm slowly tearing down the things I don't need.
Right, but I don't think that this is even.
Well,
this matters one way or the other.
Well, it matters because when I get to post, it's the same thing, right? Because that forces me to think, does this job have color grading? And then I start thinking
What
about.
you're saying is you want to start with a template with all items. So that
Yeah.
you can check them off.
I can check them off, exactly. So that's why I like Movie Magic, because it has all the line items already, and I'm just basically like excluding them out. And then when I go into post, it's the same deal. Like I start thinking about, and sometimes I'll have like a second conversation with the clients when it comes to post, because then in post I'll start thinking about things like their delivery date and like how approval works.
Let's just take it back real quick. To what you said, like that was really good, was creating a map, right?
Mhm.
Just in your head as to what it's going to take from the entire production through post, right? Like, so I think that that's a really good way to summarize what we need to do. And why that's really important is it allows you to understand what type of production it is, where the serious moments are, right? And that's where I think that it's going to help a lot, is creating that map of they're going to be the most important places on the map to hit, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like if you create a road map or you go on a road trip across the U.S., right, and you got your key cities that you have to do these things in, right? Like, say you kind of like went like with, your start and end date, but you need to get to here by this end date, right? Mm-hmm. Where are the key you want to hit this area, you want to go to the Grand Canyon, you want to make sure you're seeing Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, right? Like, exactly. So you at least need to go these ways, right? So these are important. So like, I think that's really a good way to illustrate it. In terms of like with the corporate video, their map's completely different, right? So those key moments that I want to highlight right now for agency for commercial work, right, is your agency is going to expect to have. I mean, there's an overarching. They expect us to take care of all the problems. That's what they're paying us to do. First off, they're expecting us to take care of all the problems and see them ahead of time, but the most important things I think would be a specific review process, and then there would also be those specific stages in post, right? You have your offline, you have your online. It goes to grade, it goes to music, it goes to all this, and they all expect to be available. They expect to get revisions and have them done on time and deliver on time, right? And those, even though there's a map of we need to get to here, they still need to see the dates that all those things are happening, right? So that goes down to your calendar.
Your schedule is going to be like your best friend. So here's a good example I just thought of. So I think the most challenging job post-wise that me and Josh have done is, there's two actually, but the one that was like really a time crunch, and it was actually pretty spectacular that we achieved it in time.
I think it was no big deal.
Disney Plus.
Okay, I thought you were going to say Caro.
No. Anessa is also a very interesting one.
We've had a lot of hard post jobs.
But think about it. Like, if you ever tell anybody in this industry that we did Disney Plus in 4 to 5 weeks, everybody's like...
Production included.
Everybody's like, how the hell did you do that? If you tell them that... It's not that, though. So, because, like, when you actually look at the load, especially when they start seeing the CG and special effects and stuff like that, they're like, holy shit. Like,
Let's do this. I think this is a really good idea to use this as a case study, and we focus on this, and let's go through the commercial, all right, shot by shot, and we can explain, because I think maybe this, would this be beneficial to you? So we can go through here and you can see the bits and pieces of the commercial and understand why we had to prep 3 weeks for this scene versus the other scene. I think that this is going to really help a lot.
Sure.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
So, so
your sound's off on YouTube.
no, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
So, you're not getting sound on there, right? Okay. So I think that we can go without sound. Actually, oh, hang on.
No, here it's already off.
No. But I'm talking about. I'm going to play it on the TV. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about editing it in later.
No, the microphone will pick up the sound.
Okay, cool. So, all right. So let's just watch the whole thing, right? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, where do we start? So much I forgot about.
So when we first started out, right, we got the storyboard from the client, right, and then like and they told us a timeline, and we're like, holy shit, this is going to be super tight. And then after we made a schedule for them, our schedule included post, and our schedule included post. But I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Jake, you might. But whenever I do a job, right, and I'm not sure about something, I will call and ask people how things are done and their timeline and all. And I don't mind getting on a call to learn about something I'm not sure of or I don't know. Like,
so let's do this then. This is kind of the direction I was going to go. Let's take scene by scene.
Yeah.
And talk about the time that it took. I think that's going to help just put everything in perspective for everyone. So this scene, for example, right? So we'll play this. So there's basically three main shots to this, right? So you have this, right? Which this is a pretty typical shot, right? Like there's nothing special going on. I mean, it's got some good art direction and whatnot. In the background, so you notice the flowers creeping in. Those are practical, right?
Yeah.
Those are real.
So those flowers are real, but then when you get into this
Right here, these are
that's
real.
Yeah.
And so they have someone on a platform outside, basically raising them up into frame, right? Then here, these are all real, right?
This is real. This is real. That's added in, and these bushels on the side here. Are
But
added
this
in.
is shot on green screen, I think, right? Or blue screen, and then we just comped
Yeah,
it,
we
right?
comped it in.
So these are pretty much real. It does not mean that this is how it was shot, though, right? They probably had a flame artist come in here and retime it and roto all of these out.
Actually, yeah.
So that they could put it into it and time, because right now, like what you would probably do is you would shoot it with her and then shoot these in pieces, right? This going up and then this going down and then this, and then the editor would time it so that they all come in together. Otherwise, you got three people in three areas and it takes a long time, and they're on ladders because they're actually shooting on the second floor on this.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So, and then this I wish we had the behind the scenes footage on this, but all of these are assets. These are all actual real flowers that we shot, right?
So the way this was done is we shot it.
But none of these flowers are CG. They're all assets that we created, right? That we shot.
Yeah, so
and
there's
composited
practical and then composited.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, well, they're all practical.
Yeah, they're all practical.
None of them are created in CG.
Yeah, none of them are created in CG. They're all practical, but you have your foundation ones, and then you have the ones.
So what Arthur's saying is to put it in more layman's terms, right? Is the house was outlined with flowers, right? Literally just like this side, this here, and I think maybe here and here, and then what we did is we shot these flowers on a blue screen, right? They're these big, huge, round bouquets, and we turn it and shoot, turn it and shoot, turn it, shoot, all on a blue screen, right? So we must have spent 45 minutes just shooting flowers against a blue screen. So we had literally probably like 500 different types of angles that they could use for the flowers, all the different types of flowers, and then they composited them all on top, right, all in layers. And in the end, you had how many different layers in flame, you think? They said
it was like 160 layers or something for this shot.
And so the reason why you do that is so you have all independent control over them, right? If you watch, the flowers grow. Right here. You see how like there's movement and stuff like that? That's because they're animating. So this shot, guys, was not just something we quoted on. We consulted with the VFX company beforehand.
Yeah.
And talk a bit about that process.
So for like from the very beginning, there's another shot that I actually had I'll get to it later, but it was like the most intense conversation. Two shots are actually the most intense conversation about it with post, but like with this, I already kind of had an idea how it could be done, but I still called to talk to post about, how long it would take for them to do it. What's the process of doing it? Because here's the thing, even though I think I know something, it's better to get someone who's an expert to like confirm it, right? So you don't get into like, well, because it's this, it works differently or anything like that. So this and then during the pre-production stage, I probably had like 5 meetings with the post team before we actually shot, like back and forth going and spending half an hour to an hour and a half sitting down with them and going over all the shots. You were asking time to do this shot, Josh, or time to
prep for the shot?
Time to prep for the shot. Oh, and the other element of this shot, just so you know, it's not just post. We also had to have our team, kind of.
They had to have a full day beforehand to set up all the right? It wasn't just done on the day of.
Yeah, and the previs, like with Lena making the drawings.
This is part of the map, right? Whenever we saw the storyboards and he knew, okay, this is going to take a certain amount of time. Let's consult the CG company on how to do it.
Yeah.
And not necessarily meaning we sign the contract immediately. Like we try to, you keep the conversation going with the client and the agency, right, to keep them interested. But at the same time, you're like hustling also the vendor or the post company so that you can understand, like, guys, give me this quote. I need to have it by today at 4 p.m. so I can get them the quote at 5 p.m. Like, how can we achieve this in this budget? Or, what options do we have, right?
Yeah.
So they said, okay, we need you to install flowers beforehand. We're going to shoot them. We're going to copy paste them everywhere, right, in Flame. And in order to do that, you need to have the scene set up, the location, the flowers, the art, and everything needs to set up in this way already.
Yeah.
So as a producer, you already know you're just going to take a day of prep with the art team, right? So that sort of thing.
And again, it's like important. What was very important for talking to Post about this was I wouldn't have thought about this, but the Post team pointed out like what time of day we shot was very important. And they also pointed out that we had to have those foundation flowers because you can see the shadow that reflects on the windows, right? So if we did not do this at all, and we just composited everything, which would be the easy way,
you'd lose the dynamic of the lighting.
Yeah, and the shadows wouldn't match and all that. So that's why, like, you have to have these conversations with your team because their experience is like they're going to outweigh you like miles and yards, right? Because
And
do it
you
every
don't
day.
want to be figuring this out at the end.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That's going to create an unhappy customer. It's going to mess with your budget.
Yeah.
It's going to be a really, really bad situation.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the bus, right? The lights dimmed. We have the screen here. Actually, let's just play the scene real quick, and then we'll go step by step. So this one, I remember we were like experimenting, and I think I even said like, oh, I was as an EP, because I was an EP on this essentially, because you kind of line produce and direct.
Yeah.
We shared a lot of responsibility on this because this happened so fast, right?
Yeah.
I was scared about the shot, guys. Remember, I had cardboard cutouts created. I
You wanted multiple backups.
yes, yeah. I think I did not only cardboard cutouts of the figures, but it was different sizes.
You
even.
did 3 sizes.
Because
of
we
each.
didn't have time. Normally, you would have time to set up and do some sort of a test. We didn't have any time. So I said, let's spend the money. I don't care. I'll cover it as the production company because I want to make sure that we don't mess up on a Disney job, right?
Yeah.
So let's break it down one by one, and I'll get into that. That's the last step, right? So you have this. This is shot in a bus. We actually shot in a studio, full sound stage. We brought the bus in the stage.
Yeah.
It's an old-looking bus, right? Like a city bus. It actually broke down in the soundstage, and we had to push it. Actually, no, this is shot outside.
After.
Right, this is shot outside after, and the bus had broken down, and so we had to push it out of the studio. Got all the crew to push it into the location to shoot this one, this shot, which we shot last because it's all the ambient, right, and all the background and everything. You don't have to roto and put this in and put green screen behind it and stuff like that, right? It's always better to shoot stuff practical if you can on as far as for your backgrounds than to have to put it in later.
Yeah.
That's why the LED studios right now are becoming really big because your background, you can see exactly what it's going to look like and you don't have post time or more post time. So next shot, this is the close-up. And basically it's of the phone. This is in the studio because we're controlling the light, right? The DP could talk about it, but there's obviously like a lot of these overhead tubes of some sort that are got this pink color to it, which go in turn with the whole scene branding, right? The Turning Red movie. This is not played on the phone, right? This is a VFX comp screen replaced. So we did tracking with a green screen on it.
Yeah.
I actually like to do normally black screen,
Yeah.
so that you maintain the reflections a lot more, and then they can put them in after.
Yeah. Well, you can see it does have those reflections here. So
Yeah, I'm assuming you guys shot black or very, very dim green screen.
I think this one had to be very dim green because, and here's again, like, you know, we always assume like, oh, it's green screen, you know, or oh, it can be black. But then we had very specific conversations about each of the shots with post team, and we had, before we shot this, I think I remember running in, taking a picture of the phone, right? A screenshot, sorry, of what the DOP was doing, and then sending it to the post house to say, hey, is this better to be black screen or is this better to be green? And got them to answer and tell us what to do, and we adjusted on up front. And again, it's like,
You should be consulting the VFX artist for this.
yeah. Like you, again, like whenever you guess, if you don't have time, you know, there's certain situations you have to like wing it, but I prefer not to because whenever you wing it, you have trouble later. And that's always bigger trouble than it would be for you to spend like 5 to 10 minutes asking a question. Yeah. Yeah, so there is this. And then the big trouble for this scene was the shot after this, actually.
So this here, this background is the logo from the movie, or from the band that's in the movie called Four Town. So the reason why I'm gonna get technical a bit about VFX. So the reason why this shot was difficult, and I'm not a VFX guy. I have done it enough that I know for the most part how we can do things usually. But the thing that there's a lot happening in this scene. If you guys look at it, it's got a lot of depth, right? So the background, right, the focus is on these guys right here. Anytime you start blurring stuff, right, like if you guys have ever dealt with editing software, After Effects or anything like that, whenever you start blurring things and then you start to try to composite them in, you start running into mistakes, and it's very, very noticeable if it's not finessed exactly and perfect, right? So I knew that this was going to be an issue because we wanted this to feel like the focus be on them, where it's more shallow on the depth of field behind them and in front of them. But we still need to be able to recognize the logo. And also that means on set, if you're shooting green screen in the background, then you're having to choose your depth of field now, and you're stuck with it later in post, and you're not able to see how out of focus, defocused, or in focus the logo is in the background. So what we did is we set up LED screens behind it. So this is all LEDs. This is not, there's no VFX in the shot. The lights, maybe the lights. No. So the lights are in the back, and then we had intelligent lighting in the background waving right in front of it. So you see that in the background. That's the actual light in the background, right?
Nope.
That's VFX.
Yep.
Really? Okay. Awesome. So no, but didn't we have?
We had it, but then this actual light that goes.
Oh, so we had it, right? And you can see it, the actual lighting here, guys. Jake, please just.
Yeah. Watch it.
Okay. So if you see here, right, you see the light come across the back of the bus on the left, and then they matched it with the light in the background so that we can feel, so it feels real, right?
Yeah.
So we gave them, it's just like the house, right? You gave them as much as you can with physical assets, right? Physical set, physical design, and then they went in and enhanced it, essentially, right? But again, we didn't shoot green screen because of this, right? If you shot green screen, then you had the windows. Now you're having to comp this, and you're getting the natural distortion of the windows and the gradient that it produces, right? When the light reflects and hits the dirty window and stuff like that. So it feels much more real, right?
Yeah. My favorite, one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
So we were concerned about the logo not appearing, right? That's why we set up a giant LED screen. And what we did is we had Lena, right, who's acting basically kind of as like an on-site graphic designer. This LED screen must have been, I don't know, 4 by 5 meters. It was massive, right?
5 by 6 meters.
5 by 6 meters. No. It's just from an event company, right?
Oh.
They set it up, and it's basically one of her monitors. So she was live editing it in After Effects, and then that was her second monitor, right? She could see it on another monitor here, but it was just mirrored there. And then what they did is she had a live feed of the camera, so she could line it up in the background so that it matches, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because we have the bus on the stage on studio, we're lighting the bus. We set up the LED to cover the entire background, and then you don't want to move the bus to match the LED, right? So we just have her sitting there, and she can increase the intensity, bring it down, the brightness and whatnot. So so that we could really figure out how to set it up live.
Yeah, this is the most we winged it. Like, because this one, we didn't know that we were changing what we're changing to until 2 days before the shoot.
And there was talks of putting the band members from this band called Four Town in the background. And so that's why I created these cardboard silhouettes.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how big they were going to be, and we didn't know how far back that we were going to be able to shoot. So I got 2 or 3 different sizes, like life size, like third scale, 2/3 scale, for all of them. So
I think this is where like
we just over prepared so that we made sure we could deliver.
The Four Town, the client never mentioned that they wanted that, but like I was looking at
You saw it ahead of time.
Yeah, I
know they're going to do this.
It's not going to work. Like they're people silhouette. No one's going to recognize what it is. Right.
This is one of those things where you just had to say, okay, on the shoot day, then you're prepared for either option.
Yeah.
And you saw the warning signs ahead of time from the client. Right?
Yeah.
And then whenever they saw it in person, it clicked and they understood technically how it did or did not work.
Yeah. And then we were able to, because we already prepped it in advance, we just showed them, boom, we made this as well. and they were just like sold. Yeah,
Right.
They were just.
It's that's
Yeah.
the thing is like, so a lot of times if with the client you try to explain something and they're not buying it, it's much easier to say okay, and then on the shoot day or in post give them both options, and then they're going to see what you're talking about in that second option and say,
Yeah.
oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Right? It's easier to show them later than it is to have the argument at the same time, right? Like there's everyone in the world always thinks that it's always this or that. Make it this and that, right? And then they'll be able to choose later.
Yep.
It's and instead of or, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Let's go to
Yeah.
the next shot.
Oh, and one more
Yeah.
thing, just before, I know we're talking about posts, but you guys see these chairs,
Yeah.
right? So again, like
They were filthy.
the original ones were all torn up. These are all covers that the art team came and replaced, right? But I'm pointing this out because, again, like, it's not just posts, but you have to have that map for your art as well. You need to know how long it takes them to do things. Once we saw the actual bus, which was only 4 or 5 days before, 4 days before we shot this. Like, my question to them was, how long is it going to take to make these sheets covers and stuff? And because I alerted them immediately, they were able to go. Once we confirmed the bus that day, next morning they were able to go order it and get everything done in 3 days. So it landed exactly
That's good.
when we need it. But like, I would encourage you not to have these conversations just with posts, but have it with your art team, have it with all the different teams, so you understand how much work goes into something. And I think knowing that is also powerful, because now if the client says, oh, why can't you do this or that, you have answers. You're like, well, it takes these many days, or it's this much labor that goes into it and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay.
Next shot.
Yeah. Okay.
So this looks simple enough.
Pain in my ass.
This is probably the hardest shot there was in
One
the whole production.
of
I think it was.
the
because-
shark stuff was
Yeah, but the
hard.
shark we knew,
Mm.
right? So this is the thing. Shark models, you can buy shark models. They've got shark models.
Yeah.
This is a brand new thing. So this shot, this is all practical, right? He's standing there. We have these orange lights, right?
Yeah.
That are very tungsten. They're very powerful. Set up on the beach near him. They turn on whenever he stands up, so you feel like you have the glow of this.
Portal.
Yeah, the portal, right?
Yeah.
We have a wind machine set up, right? So it all triggers at that time, right? So that's just a matter of shooting on the set day, his having a great expression, the acting, and the direction, right? So this is what Arthur was directing, and that was easy enough. Now, this next thing is a stock shot, right, that we bought of probably Krabby or something is what it looks
Yeah,
like.
it's gonna be Riley.
So we bought this stock shot, right? And then we needed to put this portal in. So the thing is, I remember, so we started working on CG for the portal 2 weeks before, or a week before we shot.
We need to, so the process, again, this is where like having those conversations really makes a difference. Because when we went to the post house and we talked about this shot, they were like, in order to make it in time, we had a schedule. And again, we kind of made a calendar, but the post part, we kind of like, I knew enough about posts to put in generally what I thought would be there, but then they would come in and say, no, we need this in advance or this, and we changed the schedule according to that. But they said they needed to have this stock 1 week before we actually shot. Right. And the reason was because it looks simple enough, but this object in space, to make a CG that works here, they need to actually take the shot and then make markers on all of the, all these different objects. And it's not just a few markers. I saw the actual markers. They made something like 200 marking points. So that, because this doesn't have depth, right? So they actually have to tell the computer what's the distance between things and the depth and stuff like that, so that when the camera moves in relation to this, all the parallax and everything works. So they took a week just to do that. And then they took another about week to make the ring, because the assets we were given from the clients were flat, right? And then they needed to do this ring on their own. So they created this ring from scratch. On top of that, like, it looks easy, but what?
Created from scratch. It was just
Yeah, it's
like they whipped it up in the kitchen.
yeah, but what's interesting is, like, we get into these conversations where, like, you see these particles that fly off. That's not easy, right? Like, anybody who does
So-
3D is going to tell you particle effects are.
Let me talk a bit about that.
super
So
hard.
I remember what we did. So we had basically the CG supervisor visit the set, right? He was there to supervise the whole set because we had all these CG elements that have to interact with the set, right?
Yeah.
I remember we were so one of the next shots is this shark and the clawing coming up and hitting a boat in a market. While we were shooting that shot, I remember. So you're working with them. I'm talking with him. He's showing me on his phone stuff he's getting from the CG team, and it's this portal, right? And it's gray. It's not got any kind of light
Yeah.
or texture added to it. And he's just like, I'm like, oh, that was cool. He's like, the how it's reacting is just not there yet. He's like, this is 85% there, but I need to have them regenerate it. And every time they do it and they render it, it takes a day or two to render it.
Yeah.
So he had to render it out several times before he could show it to us. Jake, remember how last week I was talking about you guys make sure it's ready before you show the client? We're their client. He had rendered it out like 3 times before he showed us, before it was acceptable
Yeah.
to show us, right? We didn't show it to Disney yet, even after that, because I sent it back and I said, hey, get this better. Then we're going to show it to Disney for approval.
Yeah.
And luckily, Disney is very, very knowledgeable. They understand the process much more than typical, like food and beverage type clients. And they understood the fact that we said, hey, this is a work in progress at certain points. This is not ready. We need to get your approval, though, so we can go on to the next stage in order to meet your deadline.
Yeah.
But we had set up this process in the very beginning, so there was no surprises later saying, like, well, what are you talking about? I was expecting to see finished pieces, right? They knew that this was going to be done from the beginning because we had established that sort of workflow, that sort of communication. It was not a surprise later, right? So they understood that there was no way for us to be 2 steps ahead, essentially, that way. So anyway, so he kept regenerating this, and then you took over eventually after that, and at one point you guys said, okay, that's great, or you said this is the last time it's good, and we don't have any more time, and so we have to continue, right? And so we did. I remember that there was some conversations about what to go inside.
Yeah.
And that was not big, but it was a conversation, I remember.
Because stars, right? Like, when big objects in the distance.
But how did this affect your time? Did this affect the time at all? Because I remember you guys hadn't decided, even while shooting.
So we
It was done in post. We decided what to put in.
Yeah, so we knew it was going to be stars, right? And then in post, the conversation was, well, are the stars moving? Because if the camera's moving, right,
You want to create the
with
3D effect.
parallax,
Yeah.
right, where the objects in the background are moving with the camera. But then we had this conversation, well, do we stick to reality? Because those are so far in the distance and they're so huge, the parallax effects will be very little. You wouldn't even notice it for such a short shot. Or do we exaggerate the star movement so that it feels like there's a lot more movement there? And so we rendered it out. I decided let's do it in a more exaggerated version. So we rendered out 3 versions. We rendered out one that didn't move, one that moved a little bit, and one that moved a lot. And then we did this one that was kind of like where it's moving just a little bit in the middle. And because it felt right. Not necessarily real, but it felt right. And then we had the boat in the back that we had to add in, the storm in the background, these particle effects. They had to, so like when you look at the Doctor Strange, the actual film, right, you think, oh, it's the same one, they just redo it. No, when it's a bigger ring, they can't just enlarge it, right? Because then these particles that fly out would be just fucking massive, would be bigger than the boats and stuff. So what they did is they kept the size a little bit larger, but they also just put in more of those practical effects so that it felt proportionate to the situation. And then there's smoke on top of it and all that. And the reason, and this reflection down here as well was another thing that was challenging for them, because it looks like a small detail, but then like we had to have this whole conversation about, well, the depth of the water, actually, would it refract that way, or would it refract in a different way, right? And I'm bringing all this up because, again, these are conversations that you need to have. The more you talk about it and figure out, the less problems you have down the line.
So
and
let's
less guesswork.
we'll get into the rest of this conversation in the next,
Yeah.
or the rest of this commercial in the next training session. But what I want to try to finish up, it'll take about probably 10 more minutes, but I want to talk about how to, I'm doing the thing Trump does, all right, like this. So I want to talk about
water like this too.
yeah. What I want to do is I want to talk about the prep time for the commercial, right? And how do you know what to ask the client? And it's a very very simple process. And what I mean by that is, how do you know whether or not you need to be talking about VFX before? Like, as a producer, how do you understand, if you don't have any knowledge of this type of VFX or this CG, or you've not had any firsthand experience with it yet, how do you know that you should be bringing it up, right? If you don't bring it up, it comes back to us as our fault, to the client, right? There's no getting out of that, right? It's our issue. We have to solve it. So how do we know to approach it? How do we know that we need to be thinking about this beforehand? And the way this happens is you're given a storyboard, right, or a script of some sort, and it all starts with that, right? And so what you have to do is you have to have it's this map, right? But the map is based off of what your shot is. Your second shot, your third shot, your fourth shot. And literally what you guys need to do is go, first shot, what's required, right? And second shot, what's required. Third shot's what's required. The next cut, the fourth, fifth, right, all the way down your storyboard, all the way down to the end, what's required for every single thing, and list it out, basically, okay? When you list it out, so when you have this storyboard, right, this is what one of your first PPMs is, and you can do this individually, but I suggest what you do is you gather all the departments together. You go over all these pieces together, right, in one PPM, and you say, guys, this is a storyboard. We're going to have the director walk us through his whole vision for the process. He walks everyone through, right? The director, when they're on set, they need to understand the limitations of what they can and can't do, and then what the client's expecting. And so they got this box that they got to stay in, and then this thing that they got to deliver, and then they got to understand that they have to stay in this box. And if they don't understand it, then they're going to go do a bunch of stuff that's all over the place, maybe in budget, out of budget, you don't know, but they need to know their parameters, right? And so that's what these meetings in the beginning are for, because when you have the director walking everyone through the treatment, the story, everything in the beginning, they got the art department there. You got your producers that are there, your production coordinators there, your production managers there, your art department, your production designer, your DOP is there. Your I wouldn't say you need your gaffer at this point, but like the more you can get, the better, right? And that's because you get your CG guy, your VFX team, get the post team there in that meeting. Then when you're going shot by shot, they're going to say, no, this shot, the director says, so this shot, I just need this quick ring done in CG. The CG guy is going to speak up and say, like, I need 3 weeks to do that, dude. Yeah. And he's going to be like, well, I ain't got 3 weeks. And then everyone's going to turn to the producer and say, like, you need to make an executive decision and then sell it to the client.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to be able to understand, to say to the CG team, well, what can you do? And like help them meet in the middle, right? And okay, well, if we can't do that, what is the solution? You're the director.
this is your part to direct. This is your creative problem solving. Come up with a solution that we can sell to the client.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really where the talents of a director comes in directing commercials, is figuring out how. So we couldn't do everything you wanted for the shot, probably, Arthur. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted aliens to come out and stuff like that, right? Like in the movie. But we had two problems. One was the movie at the time wasn't out yet, so like they couldn't let us know what those.
This is more client said no to this stuff.
Yeah, but like we talked about having ships and stuff come out as well that were just like generic, like not to do with their
Yeah.
actual Disney assets. But then we talked to the CG team, and they're like, that's not no time for that, because once you have objects coming
So
in.
did you have any like convincing the client on this that you had to do?
No, I just basically told them like we don't have enough time to
Okay.
do that.
So
they were like,
luckily, like I said, like this, Disney's a fantastic client. They're
Yeah.
easy to work with.
Yeah.
And their understanding of the limitations more so. But this is kind of the thing, like, you know, for the flowers, like the quick solution for this, right? It would have been fantastic to be able to have CG flowers and have them grow in different ways and everything, but we understood the limitations, and so the CG team or the VFX team, the post team, said the quickest way to do this is by shooting the assets, and then we can animate it and put
Yeah.
comp all the layers together.
yeah.
And then the same thing for this, right? Quickest way. I don't know if I suggested this or who suggested the LED. Maybe Pete, the DOP.
It was actually the AD.
The AD. Okay. Okay, so see, this is another thing. He had meetings with the AD, the assistant director, had a good idea.
Yeah.
A good director collaborates.
Yeah.
Your assistant director making or suggesting stuff is not a bad thing, right? A lot of people have egos and that gets in the way. This is where a good team, right? Like you got Spielberg, you got all these big directors, they use the same teams because they know everyone works together, right? Same thing for us. Like we try to use these people that we know are dependable. And
This was
is it Fluke?
no, not Fluke. It was you like him too. What's his name? No, not Boyce. I brought him in. He worked on DTAC as well.
He had the tattoos.
Yeah.
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 That guy's, I forget his name. He's great though.
Yeah, he's cool. He's cool.
He's
If
great.
If his English was good, I would hire him on every job. Yeah.
Yeah, he's super. He's very fast, very proactive, very proactive. Yeah. So
exactly.
So yeah. So that's great. So that's the thing is like. So that's what I'm saying is like. Even though this is not his department, he at some point in his career he's experienced something that reminded him he could do this and said, "Hey, we did this before.
Yeah.
What about this?" And it helped the whole
Yeah.
collaboration, which helped in turn the whole production, right? So that's what I'm saying is like is if you have these meetings before and you go through the whole thing, and guys, 90 in my book, like 90% of the stuff, if the director is, if you have the director and the DOP there, you'll be able to solve like 90% of the problems, in my opinion. The DOP usually is very experienced in how to shoot because he's shot for multiple directors. He doesn't shoot just for one guy. He's done a lot of stuff, right, usually. And they'll be able to, 9 times out of 10, tell you usually what the proper way to do something is. And then you can bring in the CG and post team to kind of fill in the gaps on stuff.
So I think a process that I don't see all the time at Mbrella Films, but I when I was working outside of Mbrella Films, it was basically best practice. Was when you get because our job's usually like it's so fast, right? It comes in, we bum, 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 then we go, right? But other places, what they would do is once you have your initial like hire everybody, the producer would do a brief, but kind of like very simple. And then they'd set a day for like director to come in, all department heads to come in, and that's their first like official brief. And then once they go through all the story, what happens is everybody kind of like one department at a time starts like nitpicking at like the problems or the challenges they're going to have, so that everyone's aware from the very beginning, like this is going to be fucking hard, this is going to require this. the AD at that point is going to start thinking scheduling, like how do I tackle these things in my schedule? The director is going to know what's sensitive. The DOP is going to know, like, you know, like how his camera has to work around these objects and stuff like that. And then from there, like maybe the storyboard's adjusted or something. But like the best practice is to have that first initial meeting. And this is before you have even your first PPM with your client, right? So that when you get into that first PPM with your client, you can start pointing out like, hey, so we might need to adjust this because this, and this, right? Something we should do more. We don't always do it simply because I think it's like once COVID hit, we kind of got into this thing where everybody works from home, you know, and we just have phone calls or individual briefs and stuff. Whereas like in the old days,
It's a double-edged sword now.
yeah, like you would force everybody to come in, like you were officially hired on the job when you came in for that first brief. And you would hold off like any other talks about the project until you had that first brief with anybody. That doesn't really happen now, but
A lot more interviews at that time. A lot more,
yeah, like
in-person meetings to make sure that
yeah.
it's the right person for the job, and you know, not even that the right person for the job, that like that person will execute it in a way that you need, you know.
Yeah, but this is even like after hiring. Like this is the process where like I remember when I was an AD first starting out, like I would go to Lex to Editide, get the brief, sit down with all the team. That's where I met Tori too, and then Ant would brief us on his commercial, and then I'd spend the whole day with the art team, with wardrobe, and we would go over every single element, and then I'd try to get their schedule. I'd try to get their
Everything you need.
everything I need, like what their trouble spots, and I do this. This is the practice I do is, regardless if I'm directing, producing, or assistant directing, right? When I was in NIFA, my producing teacher told me that whenever you're producing, one thing to do is always find your top 3 things that are your top 3 challenges. And if you can solve these top 3 challenges, everything else usually falls into place. And then so I'd always kind of go through and identify like the 3 hardest things. I do highly recommend that because that forces you to think about every single thing, and then you're identifying. You can't come up with a top 3 if you haven't thought of everything, right? So
Yeah.
that forces you to think about everything.